Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Techies 15 Live. This is our 15-minute drop-by session, virtual drop-by session that we do weekly at Immigrant Techies Network. Consider it your water cooler moment, your virtual water cooler moment. And we do this to keep in touch with the community, to just see what people are building, what people are working on, and have a way of connecting, staying in touch. Even if you're not going for in person events, through Techies 15 Live, you get to hear some of the things that are going on. And we bring in very cool people every week. And our cool person this week is Dr. David Finch. Welcome, David.
It's nice to be a cool person.
Yeah, awesome. So, can we meet you a little bit about yourself? I know you wear so many hats, and but yeah, if you can just tell us a little bit about you and what you have been up to in the ecosystem.
Sure. I'm a professor at Mount Royal in the business school. My area is marketing, but I really focus on workforce development. Most of my research is in the area of understanding the business of education and learning and how to create more efficient opportunities to unlock really the potential of our community and our city.
Okay, that's a very short version.
Could make it much longer. One of my hats, of course, is part of this is really looking at learning as an ecosystem and trying to break away from what we call the legacy model, which is something that emerged out of the 1860s from the Industrial Revolution and really frames most of learning today, and really to look at what's happening in a lot of sectors, including tech, around the framework of open innovation and co-creation, and say, how do we build a learning system that is part of that? And Learning City
Mm-hmm.
is that organization that really we built the underlying infrastructure to support it. And then on top of that, just for fun, I'm doing a second doctorate at the School of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape at the
Oh
University of
wow,
Calgary.
just for
That is,
fun.
yeah, which is fun. But what we're focusing on with that program is studying how do you design cities to learn? Because learning is ultimately, 100 years ago, it was about access to natural resources, whether it be trade routes or mining or oil. Now it's about the ability to mine and really mobilize your talent. And that's really what will differentiate great cities in the future. So my doctorate is really focusing about how do you design cities that are
Mhm.
designed to learn.
And I know, so under the Learning City platform, there was a program or a study that was done a few years ago that investigated skills, what it means to be future ready. What did you find? What did that activity, that initiative, what did you find?
So one of the things that is not new, there's a term that emerged out of the Cold War called VUCA, which is an acronym talking about volatility and uncertainty and complexity and
Mm-hmm.
ambiguity, and the fact that we all have to really work in this accelerating volatile environment where we don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, let alone 2 years from now. Therefore, um, the research we've done, and this has been very consistent, it's not new, but for the last 15 years, I've been studying this issue, is the principle of what we call adaptive capacity, which is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, is ultimately the ultimate skill. So it's not about I can code X or I can write Y, because it's about really having the underlying capacity to adapt and evolve. And I use a metaphor in which, my background is product management prior to moving to academia, and I worked in telecom and tech. And I use the comparison of the BlackBerry versus the iPhone, because the
Mm-hmm.
BlackBerry was really designed as a one-hit wonder. It had no scalability, it had no capacity to adapt. It was designed to really do some basic functions well. Um, Whereas the iPhone in 2007 was designed in a manner in which the platform was highly adaptable, because the principle of the business model was, I have no idea what the market's going to want in 2015, but the market will decide what the device is for. The device, therefore, is just a conduit. So what happened? The one hit wonder BlackBerry died because it couldn't adapt, because the platform was a single use. So if we translate that to people, if your one hit wonder is I'm great at coding X, or I'm an engineer, or I'm great in this area, I always say the last thing you want to be, and the last thing you want your kids to be, is the BlackBerry, right? So if we adopt a vision of we need to all be iPhones, which is recognizing change is great, recognizing learning is continuous, and there's a variety of
Mhm.
factors accelerating that. Therefore, we just have to embrace it and ride with it and not fear it.
I think that's gonna be my new slogan. Be an iPhone, not a BlackBerry.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's so apt. That's so apt. You know, for many immigrant professionals, we come from um, communities that highly value education, but more so in terms of the letters behind your name. So many of us have like second degrees, third degrees, and sometimes people find it hard that I've been studying all my life. You're telling me I need to learn something new again. So yeah, so that deeply resonates with the immigrant community in terms of what it means to be a continuous learner, really, and a continuous unlearner as well, right?
And what I encourage people to think about it, whether you're on the employer and hiring side or whether you're on the staff employee side, um, I take recruitment and hiring and management as a risk management exercise, right? Because as a marketing professor, when I ask my students what create great products, what creates leads ultimately to value creation, they
Mm-hmm.
always, they're marketing students. Oh, great campaigns, great product design, blah blah blah. I'm like, no, no, those are all effects, right? What's the cause? Because the cause is what produces great campaigns, what produces great product. The cause is about who's in the room, who have you hired. Therefore, if you mess up that, you don't have great campaigns, you don't have great products, you don't have high profited margins, right? Because it starts with who's in the room. And therefore, what we found is employers, rightly so, treat hiring as a risk management exercise. And they
Mm-hmm.
do it very poorly because the tools to do it are very poor. So instead of actually assessing competencies and actual skills, what they assess is what we call proxies of those. Oh, you have a university degree. Oh, you have a master's degree. Oh, you must have worked there. Oh, you have a professional reference from person Y. Those are all proxies, and actually, they're not very effective proxies empirically.
Mm-hmm.
They actually are not predictors of performance, right? But we wrap ourselves with these proxies from a pure risk management lens. So, our world is what if we could move beyond proxies? What if we could, in fact, assess efficiently competencies and allow people to choose their different pathways to learning? And so, the metaphor, I'm all about metaphors, Blackberries and iPhones. The next metaphor is the ladder that we've climbed. You've climbed,
Mm-hmm.
I've climbed. Somebody's told us to get on that learning ladder when we were 4 or 5. We started climbing that ladder. It involved a kindergarten. It involved going to elementary school. It involved, for most people in Calgary, for example, most people in post secondary, about 85% of the population, some form of post secondary. And then you exit the ladder, and we all kind of are variants of the same, right? Um, Whereas my vision is a climbing wall, right? Because the problem with the ladder is it's not your ladder, it's somebody else's ladder. It's not very efficient. It's actually very expensive. A 4 year university degree in Alberta is about $80,000. The average student leaves with about $32,000 in debt. And the real cost, what I tell my students about, is 10,000 hours. A 4 year university degree is 10,000 hours, right? In the world of our parents or grandparents, where that was in fact a ticket to high paying employment and a career
Mm-hmm.
pathway, that was a business
Was
case
a
that
worthy
maybe made
investment.
right.
Yeah.
But today it's the climbing wall. So if we shift from a ladder to the climbing wall, what's a climbing wall metaphorically? Well, guess what? You own the pathway. It's no one tells you where to climb because you can choose any direction. You start all different places and you have all different visions and pathways to get there. But on that climbing wall Minnie, is this 15 minutes, every podcast, every book. It might involve a university or it
Mm-hmm.
might involve an online course via Coursera. It really depends as you start owning your own career pathway. What's missing are two major components to really operationalize this climbing wall metaphor. And we did a study on this for Calgary Economic Development in the city of Calgary. And to give context, about learning pathways in Calgary. We identified 30,000 different programs in the city is offered, right? When we look across the entire scope of learning. And that's everything from religious organizations that provide programming to sports and recreation organizations to
Mm-hmm.
arts to traditional certified learning programs. Only 15% are part of the provincial system. 85% of learning is outside the system because it's a Sunday school, it's a summer camp, it's a program at Winsport. But guess what we're learning? We're learning there. We just don't recognize it. So the two components to operationalize the climbing wall is what really I'm working on with Learning City. The first one's navigation. Having 30,000 options and then an infinite number of options, obviously in a digital context, is overwhelming. So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm again marketing prof, consumer behavior says if I'm overwhelmed with choice, I fall back to the latter. It's
Oh,
easy.
yeah.
So we need to create a navigational pathway that says I want to go here and have the system say, well, here's 3 or 4 different pathways. You could pursue a degree. You could pursue these short courses. You could get a job and build this experience and these skills. All these things, this is the power of technology and AI in being able to consolidate and create that learning map that we're looking for through the navigation. And the second is you've got to have autonomous independent systems to verify those credentials. So when I learn something, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to learn something independent of a classroom. And therefore, back to the risk management lens, I need an independent body to say, I've learned something and this is what I can do, which is very different than studying at a university and being handed a credit, 3 credits at the end of a course or degree, because this is going to be very task specific.
Right. So how do we make sure that industry is up to speed with that?
Yeah,
And also academia, like the academic institutions, the model of delivery at this point, and then what we're finding actually works. So there's always a gap between what works and what's the status quo. So how do we get there? You work in a university, so
well, so first of all, betting the future on the speed and agility of certified learning is a bad bet, and employers know that.
yeah.
Um, Employers, we have to put again my product management hat. Who's my customer? My customer is actually the employer, right? Because when I look at what's their motivation, what's their purchasing behavior, it's helped me manage risk, right? I don't want to have to hire somebody and then hire somebody again in 6 months' time, right? It's costly, it's slow. I invest in training and then they depart either because they're not effective or they're just not a good fit. So we've got to create the tools and systems so the employer is buying in because at the end of it, what they're looking for is we're framing this all around trust and legitimacy, right? Why do they keep falling back to a university or college or post secondary accreditation? Because they trust it.
Yeah.
The government backs it. It says so. When you or I set up our own little, let's set up our own little school and hand out our own little pieces of paper. Everyone's going like, who the hell are they? I don't trust that. I don't think
Exactly.
that's legitimate, right? So this is why it's a community level initiative, right? Because fragmentation is bad. I'm working on a study right now in the world of marketing in which there's 28 different certifications for to become a digital marketer, right? By Microsoft, by Google, by universities and colleges from the Canadian Marketing Association, the American Marketing Association. There are an endless number of alphabet soup of digital marketing credentials. When there's 28, there's none because 95% of businesses are small, medium enterprises. You
Mm-hmm.
apply for a job and you've got like an alphabet soup of all these credentials I have, and they've never heard of any of them, you might as well have nothing, right? So when we think about the issue of how do we build and bring employers on board, it's about actually harmonizing uh, assessment, harmonizing brands, so we build out consistent brands. So somebody says, "Oh, I've heard of that. I trust that." The one I lean to as an example is the Red Seal model, right? The Red Seal model is for trades. But when somebody has a Red Seal, it's a passport across Canada. I learned and I get an apprenticeship carpentry certification in Alberta. It's a
Mm-hmm.
Red Seal recognized certification. That means I can use it in BC, I can use it in Ontario. It's not an alphabet soup of random credentials because it's under the master brand of called Red Seal. It has
Mm-hmm.
legitimacy amongst employers. What
Right.
we need to do is break the current alphabet soup, whether it be from professional associations or universities and colleges, of random credentials that mean nothing and frankly create more confusion in the market, to creating a harmonized passport model where an employer says, "Hey, that's been certified. I trust that because it's credential X," and then
Mm-hmm.
that creates the efficiency of the market.
I know we're out of time, but I want to quickly mention this. So, how does that, everything you just described, how does that lead into what it means to have a learning city?
Well,
How
it's
have you connected those? Yes.
because the system right now, and I said it's a wonderful place. Again, my business mindset. I mean, it's a wonderful place because we don't have to build a system. We identified over 3,000 organizations in
Mm-hmm.
Calgary that are part of the learning system. They're gyms, they're art studios, they're kindergarten classes, they're churches, mosques, and synagogues. They're all part of a system. They're all investing time, and their clients or partners are investing time. The library, the city of Calgary, through the public library, offers over 200 courses. Here's the problem with that, right? Um, I invest time in that course. What do I get at the end of it? Nothing. I get a piece of paper saying I sat in a room for 3 days or I sat in a room for 3 hours. An employer doesn't care, right? So what's interesting about the model is the capacity is in the system, but the capacity is underutilized. It's being
Right.
undersubscribed because people like these are offering great programs, but they're saying, I need some evidence at the end of it that I've got something unique and new. So the ability to create that underlying what we call academically structural capital in the form of what we call these unbundled certificates that really
Mm-hmm.
decouple the learning pathway from the assessment is the way in which we start mobilizing, unlocking the capacity that's in the system. That is far easier than saying, let's build a whole new system. We don't have to build a system. The
Right. You don't have to
system's
build a new
there,
system. Yeah.
right? The greatest challenge, though, and my focus is the existing what we call natural monopoly of higher education. And that is the natural monopoly that they have um, undue control of the market, the learning market. And until we start dealing with that issue of monopoly, it will always continue to suppress innovation and competition in the learning
Does this
market.
get you in trouble at work?
Ah, that's the beauty of academic freedom. I
Right.
always say I'm paid by the taxpayers, so my commitment is to Albertans. That's who I'm paid for.
Awesome, awesome. Wow. I know we could go on and on. We try to
Yeah,
keep this short. And yeah. So if people want to reach out to you, is LinkedIn good as a way of
LinkedIn's great,
connecting? They
and
wanna- yeah.
email is great too. dfinch@mtroyal.ca. Feel free. I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, David. Thanks for your time.
Thanks again for the invite.
All right. You enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.